Hello everyone, and welcome back to the studio. In this video, we're going to talk about the two welders that we have available for you to use in the studio. Both of the welders that you have access to are what we call a MIG welder, M-I-G, metal inert gas, okay? Essentially, what that means is that there's a metal wire that comes out of the center of the gun that you're going to be using to weld, and there's also an inert gas that's ejected, okay? I'll talk more about that in a moment. Right behind me, you actually see the tank that holds the inert gas. This particular gas, if memory serves, let's see if we have it written here, is 75% argon and 75% argon and 25% carbon dioxide. So basically what that means is it's heavier than the surrounding air, and it's not combustible, it's not volatile, okay? What happens is when you're welding, it actually generates a little pool of gas that keeps all of that heat that surrounds the weld that you're making, which is like the temperature of the sun. I mean, it's crazy hot. It keeps it from reacting with the surrounding atmosphere. It's like a little insulating pool of gas, and you need that to keep your welds from getting all pocked and looking like the surface of the moon. That's how you make a smooth weld. So let me just kind of go back over that for a minute. Now, what I'm going to show you is a slightly gunked up nozzle from the gun or torch that we have on the end of the welding gun here. And I'll back up and show you the whole thing here in a moment. But what I want to show you first of all is that inside is a little wire center conductor. If I take off this part of the nozzle, you can see it even more clearly, okay? There's that little sort of like piece of wire that comes out. And if you look down here, you'll see little holes. This is actually where the inert gas emerges. All that gets funneled through your nozzle, okay? So these are the components for which this particular arc welder is named. Now we'll also need to talk about arc in a moment as well. Now what I want to do is just show you how to set this welder up, and then we'll go into a few more details about how it works, okay? So for starters, I'm going to go ahead and just move my focus over here, and you can see on the wall. Now I'm down really low right now so we can have access to the welder, but you'll see right back there is a little breaker box on the wall, and it's got a big switch on it. First thing you have to do when you're getting ready to weld is ask me to come over and unlock it for you. So I'll get out my keys, I'll find the right key. Seems almost impossible that I would be able to do that effectively each time, but I did it okay. I take off the lock and boom, I turn on the power. That's phase one. Now somebody left the power on this tool, so I'm turning it off. It should have been turned off before it was actually powered down with the breaker. Okay, so first things first, unlock it. Next thing you're going to do, and I'm going to carry you over to see this, next thing you want to do is you want to take a look at these gas gauges up on top of the inert gas tank. Right over here, there's actually a little needle on the left-hand side. This is the pressure that's coming through the hose. That should be at about 20 psi. You can see there's a little black mark here. You're looking for that to be pretty close to that measurement, in the neighborhood of at least 5 psi, close to 20 as possible. If it looks like it's a little further off, ask your monitor to help you out with that. Okay, please don't adjust any of the valves on top of the tank. Next thing we want to do, now that we're back over here with the welder, is take a look at the front of the welder. I'm going to go ahead and pan down like that so that you can see what the interface looks like, okay? Now you'll see there's a couple of dials. There's a little chart that's set up here, okay? And there's an on-off button down here. Now the two welders that we have function in slightly different ways. So I'm gonna have to cover both welders for you. First thing you're gonna do, power it up. You'll see when I do that, this particular welder comes alive with two LED readouts. Oh boy, that thing's not in very good shape. There we go. Two LED readouts right there, okay? One controls one number, the other one controls the other number. We'll talk about those in one moment, okay? Now when it's powered on, just so you know, I can pull the trigger on my torch and you'll see wire starts to come out, all right? Whenever you pull the trigger, two things are activated. One, gas starts to flow through the nozzle, and two, the wire starts to come out, okay? Those are the things you have to be aware of. This piece, this knob on the left, actually controls the voltage, the amount of electricity that's going to flow from this little center conductor to the piece of metal you have set up on your table. Right now it's safe because I haven't hooked up a ground. I'm not grounded to anything. I don't have the other end of my cable grounded to anything, so there's no chance for this arc to travel across to my finger, all right? The other one right here controls the speed at which this wire passes through the gun, okay? So that's what we're trying to monitor here, voltage and wire speed. Now, in a moment, I'm going to show you how you adjust those things or how you get started adjusting those things. But let me talk to you just a little bit about how I want you to manage setting up the machine and getting it ready to work at your table. So I'm going to have to back you up a little bit. Here we go. I'm going to have to readjust my camera like that and move it so that we can see both. There we go. The MIG welder here, all right, and the table here. Now the first thing we have to do, and I've uncoiled it a little bit already, is uncoil gently and carefully the hose. Now this hose is the hose through which the gas and the center wire passes, the center conductor. Now you want to set it up in a way that it's not going to get stepped on. And you also want to set it up in a way where it's not too tightly wound. You don't want it to kink. All right? Let me just go ahead and set my focus right there. Okay? Next thing you want to do is you want to take your ground clamp, which I've already unfurled, and you want to just clamp it to the table. There's actually on this acorn table, there's a little welded on piece that allows you to attach this relatively small clamp, okay? At this point, if I took my gun, and what I'm going to do really quick is clip off this extra center conductor. If I take my gun or torch, I make contact with that table and I pull the trigger right now, I'm going to start to weld. So I want to keep this torch away from the table for now. So I'm just going to lay it, I'm going to cradle it in the top of the welder. So let me come over here and let's set up again and let's talk about voltage and wire speed and how you're going to start to set those speeds and voltages. Now, you'll remember that we are using 1/4 inch rod. That's the material we're going to be working with primarily. I think there's one or two of you that may be using 1/8 inch rod, but we're starting with 1/4, okay? So what we need to do is set this tool up so that we can weld with 1/4 inch rod, okay? Now, it's got a whole bunch of different indications right here along the top of this chart, and this is where we're going to look to get ourselves started. Let me just do this. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to move the camera just a touch, and I'm going to bring the camera in a little further like that so that you can see quite clearly all of these components, okay? We'll start here. Okay, so here we are on this little chart. Now, what we want to do is look first across the top. See these little black marks? They represent different thicknesses of material. The first one here that's really thick says 1/2 inch, then 3/8, then 1/4, 3/16, 1/8 inch, 14 gauge, 18 gauge, 22 gauge, okay? Now, what this is talking about is the proper weld voltage and wire speed for a piece of flat, thick metal, like a piece of sheet. A sheet of, let's say, 1/4 inch steel plate would be the 1/4 inch calibration, okay? And if you were going to put a weld onto a piece of 1/4 inch sheet, what they suggest are certain settings for voltage and wire speed. And the way you determine that is you go down to this chart and you find the right diameter of the wire that travels through the center of the torch, okay? And that wire happens to be 0.035 inches in diameter. 0.035. It's right below the one that has a black mark next to it. So at some point in time they must have used 0.03 wire in here, but now they use 0.035. So you would follow that 0.035 across until you come to 1/4 inch, okay? Right there where it says 1/4 inch, you go down and you pull it across, okay? You have 2 points of reference to this section where it has 2 different numbers. And what I'm reading in there, I don't know if you can read it, it's 21 volts with a wire speed of 375. So I would set this for 21 volts, like that, with a wire speed of 375. Like that. Now that's supposed to be, and I'll just make sure you can see those numbers, that's supposed to be the factory calibration for a piece of 1/4 inch steel plate. Let me show you what that might look like. This is a jig made out of 1/4 inch steel plate, okay? You can see it's the same diameter as this piece of 1/4 inch rod, okay? Now, if you make a weld right in the middle of this, right here, the heat will distribute very slowly out through the expanse of surrounding metal. In other words, it absorbs heat and distributes it. So it's very hard to keep this piece of metal, this larger sheet of 1/4 inch steel plate, it's hard to keep it hot. So you have to have a really high voltage and you have to have a high wire speed. And what that means is you're going really, really hot, you're really sort of turning up the juice, and then the wire speed is set high and fast so that you can keep feeding wire into it and adding lots and lots and lots and lots of molten material to fill the gap, okay? Now, a piece of 1/4 inch rod is a different matter. If I put my torch right on here and I start and I pull the trigger, okay, the heat is going to build up fast and there's not much material through which to distribute that extra heat. So you end up really heating that up way too fast at a setting like the one we have here. It just heats up too fast. And it's even worse if you're on a tip, right? Think of it. You don't have heat distribution in both directions. You only have heat distribution in one direction. So what we have to do is adjust these settings so that they're a little bit more friendly to the material that we're going to use. Now what I'm going to just suggest is dropping that voltage somewhere down around 18.5, and maybe just for beginning is to set your voltage somewhere, your wire speed to about 250. I think if you do that, that's a good place to start. Now when we start welding together, you're going to see that we actually have to tinker a little bit with those settings to get it just right. This is just a rough starting point. And what we'll get good at is analyzing whether or not it's too hot and whether or not we're just pushing too much wire or too little wire through the hose, through the torch, and onto our sort of surface. Now, let me sort of pause there, because now I think you understand how to set this up. Unlock the breaker, turn on the machine, make sure the gas is actually flowing the right way, right at 20 psi, where the mark was, and you're going to sort of, like, for now, set your voltage and wire speed to 18.5 for your voltage and 250 for your wire speed. Now, I want to walk you through the other MIG welder as well, because you need to be able to use either one, and the other MIG welder doesn't have the same settings or same setting or same way to kind of like set up the welder for working. So what I'm going to do is just quickly walk you out of here and just show you how I have it set up. Don't forget, what we have is we have over here on the acorn table, we have our ground attached to the little tab sticking off the edge of the acorn table. We have our machine set up, okay, so that we're at 18.5 volts, 250 for our wire speed, and we have, let me just see if I can get this set up for you. We have the flow rate for the gas set in the range of that black mark. Now I'm going to reset it a little bit because it looks to me like it's a little bit low. I think I want to set it so that it's at its proper flow rate, but I don't want you guys to do that. I want you to call me or call one of the studio monitors if it looks like the flow rate is wrong. Please don't adjust anything. Please don't adjust the gas. That's something you can come back and learn when you take a metal class with us.